So you're looking for the best beginner cruiser and are considering a Royal Enfield Super Meteor, the new traditionalist in the segment, or the older but more modern Kawasaki Vulcan S, both 650s, both parallel twins, and offering a different take on the cruiser segment from a styling perspective. Straight up, these aren't V-twins, and they also aren't Harleys, which will probably send some people off the deep end. There's nothing wrong with wanting to own a Harley either, but both these bikes are significantly better than the now discontinued Street 500, and I'd say are competitive against something like an 883. Not a match, but they've got some good strengths that offset where the 883 shines. Let's just focus on the Indian Super Meteor and the Japanese Vulcan S for now, however. Both are built off a 650 platform that has proven incredibly successful and also benefit from simply not being a Harley. Anyone wanting to produce a cruiser has to overcome the huge brand loyalty and awareness that Harley holds, and as a result they generally make more competitive machines, and offering a better bike is still no guarantee of success. A 650cc beginner bike also holds a special place in motorcycling lore. Americans will laugh that others are restricted as to what they can start on. We'll get some Europeans having a conniption that something as big as a 650 is considered a beginner machine, and much of Asia will be rolling their eyes, with a 650cc basically a superbike, if available at all. Here in Australia we also get a restricted version of the Vulcan S to meet our specific beginner restrictions. If you really want to be a cruiser rider, offending people should be top of the list if you want to be a real cruiser rider, and you'll be off to an amazing start with either of these choices. So how do they stack up? It's been a few years since I rode the Vulcan S, but I recently tested the Super Meteor and they are both great machines. Relatively easy to ride, easy to jump onto as a new rider, for cruisers and as 650s, and confidence inspiring, offering good performance. The 650 class is good because it bridges the gap between the more beginner-centric machines and a full-size machine with better performance, which is ideal for larger riders 2 up or just those with greater demands. That can also mean some riders never have to upgrade, or more experienced riders downgrade to these machines. So both bikes are parallel twins, but the Vulcan S, despite being the older bike, wins the performance stakes here at 61 horsepower and 63 Nm of torque to the 46.4 horsepower and 52.3 Nm of torque on the Super Meteor. Both run 6-speed gearbox, none of that 5-speed rubbish, although only the Royal Enfield gets the slipper clutch as well. There's no quick shifter on either of these machines, but we are talking cruisers here. As parallel twins, both offer smoother, more linear, and a greater spread of power, sacrificing quite a bit of the torque, especially bottom end torque, compared to a larger V-twin. The reason I say larger is because the smaller V-twins, even 650s, don't tend to have much of an advantage here, at least talking cruisers. Bikes like the Street 500 or perhaps a V-Star 650 are both more limited in performance. On the chassis and ergonomic side of things, it's an interesting mix. The Vulcan S is lighter at about 220 kilos to the Super Meteor's 240 kilos. The Vulcan S runs 41mm forks and a single shock with preload adjustment. The new Super Meteor benefits from 43mm Showa USD forks in a clear win on paper, and runs the more traditional dual shock setup, also with preload adjustment. There's a bit more travel at the rear too, and for me at 75 kilos, I'd say the Super Meteor is the better sprung of the two, with a less shocking rear setup. Get it? While heavier, the Super Meteor for my lighter frame handled the rear a little better with more comfort, with front end performance good on both, but the Royal Enfield having a lighter front end feel. That's also reflected in the feel of these two bikes. The Vulcan S actually offers a bit more of a traditional cruiser seating position thanks to a much lower seat height at just over 700mm or 28 inches to the 740mm or 29 inches on the Super Meteor. The taller Super Meteor is a little more sprightly and benefits from the taller seat, however between the two feels a little less cruiserish. As a new rider, you're probably scratching your head to what that means, but I think the Royal Enfield is a little more rider friendly and a little more neutral in the handling, which are both good things. Both offer good clearance for a cruiser too, especially cornering clearance, and both run forward controls. Bars are wide and tallish, but the lower seat of the Vulcan really comes into play, opening up that ride triangle between the seat and the bars. On the braking side of things, there's a single disc brake setup front and rear on both bikes. The Vulcan runs a 300mm front and 2-pot caliper to the 320mm unit and 2-pot on the Meteor. A more noticeable difference is the 250mm disc and single piston caliper on the Vulcan being outclassed by the 300mm disc and 2-pot caliper at the rear of the Super Meteor, which has a very strong rear brake. That might make rear lockups a little easier, but both bikes should be available with ABS, and it'd be foolish not to take that option just to save a little money as a new rider if you're buying new. Other differences include a 1.5 litre smaller tank on the Kawasaki and the wheel and tyre setups. The Kawasaki runs an 18-inch front and 17-inch rear, where the Royal Enfield goes a 19-inch and 16-inch front and rear respectively. With new pricing being similar between the two models, if you can afford new, either should easily be an option. If you're on a budget though, a second-hand Vulcan is more likely than the Super Meteor, which was only released this year. The biggest factor probably coming down to styling and looks, which is obviously subjective and just a matter of what you like and would want to own. The Super Meteor, as mentioned earlier, is a much more traditionally themed machine with very little plastic, a nice mix of chrome or polished finishes, good paint and finish quality, plus those cool dual exhausts. The Vulcan S is of course no slouch here, but it's a more modern looking machine which may not work for those who are after a more traditional looking cruiser, while the exhaust system is screaming out for an aftermarket exhaust to clean up the looks a little. I have a feeling from the long-term ownership perspective, the Vulcan S will hold its finish better, although Royal Enfield are catching up with each new bike, which is very nice to see. Overall thoughts, the Vulcan S definitely has a performance advantage and a bit more bite in this regard, even with a lower, more relaxed seating position. The Super Meteor is a bit more laid back from that performance perspective, which is very Royal Enfield, but seems to have a clear handling advantage and a more manageable overall package at the cost of a taller seat. At the end of the day, both are great options, and while larger bikes, being cruisers helps as one of the easiest classes of bike to manage, possibly second only to scooters. But let me know which of these two machines you'd pick below in the comments, or what alternative cruiser you'd prefer over these two. Do you think starting on a 650 cruiser is a good idea, or if you're in an unrestricted region of the world, would you just go to a full power cruiser and get as much torque as you possibly could? Anyway, stay safe out there and thanks for watching.